Folks, yet again, my name is James Hill here at BleacherReport.com, and in this stream today, we are going to be going over the entirety of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2023 NFL Draft Class. I'm going to be giving my own personal grades for each selection that is made by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, giving my own thoughts and opinions, and then, hey, at the end of this stream, I'm going to be giving an overall grade for the Bucs 2023 draft class. Hopefully you guys all enjoy and let us know your own personal grades for the Buccaneers selections in the chat throughout this stream. But folks, let's go ahead and get started with the first selection that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers made with the 19th overall pick in round number 1. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers selected defensive lineman out of Pitt, Calijah Kancey. And this is a guy that is a phenomenal fit, in my opinion, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. Why do I say that? Firstly, let's take a look at the measurables. 6'1", 281 pounds. This is a guy that fits very well in a Todd Bowles defense for the Buccaneers. And he's got the athleticism to play either on the defensive line or even possibly as a stand-up edge defender. And I think he's even got enough size to play possibly defensive tackle in some situations as well. He is so athletic. He ran a 4.67 40-yard dash, a 1.64 10-yard split coming out of the NFL draft. He was first out of all the defensive tackles in this draft in terms of overall athleticism score. And you look at his numbers coming out of Pitt the last 2 years, and he was an absolute force. Going back to 2021, he had 13 tackles for loss and 7 sacks, 23 solo tackles, 33 total tackles. He also had a forced fumble and a pass deflection in there as well, playing in 12 games. Then you take a look at 2022. He finished with 14 and a half tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks, and 14 assisted tackles, 31 total tackles, and 17 solo tackles playing in 11 games. That to me shows a guy that has the ability to both stop the run and rush the passer as well. Something that was very necessary and very much needed on this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. I think that the Bucs are getting a guy who can line up so well with starting nose tackle Vita Vea, starting defensive end Logan Hall. You cannot forget that the team also added Greg Gaines in free agency as well to be a run-stopping defensive end. Then you take a step further back in the front seven. You have Devin White as a pass-rushing inside linebacker. You have Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, Shaq Barrett, Anthony Nelson, and a couple of other guys who were drafted that we'll talk about later on in this stream to add to that pass rush, to add to that run stopping. And I think that this really creates a very potent, very solid front seven unit for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This was personally one of my favorite players coming out of this draft class. I was very pleasantly surprised when he was selected by the Buccaneers here at pick 19. And if I had to give an overall grade for this selection, folks, I'm giving it a solid A. I think the scheme fit is there. I think a very unique, very sharp defensive mind in Todd Bowles is amazingly excited to be working with a player of the caliber of Calijah Kancey. And I think this is going to open up even more things that the Buccaneers can do with their very exotic, very versatile defense. But this was not the only solid selection that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers made in this draft. They traded up in the second round with the 17th overall pick in round number 2. They selected offensive lineman out of North Dakota State, Cody Mauch, with their second round pick. And folks, this is a guy that I know a lot of people were incredibly excited about, and it's not hard to see why. Cody Mauch was an absolute unit while at North Dakota State. He was a guy that started 37 total games at left tackle for this North Dakota State college program, and he overall did really well in that role. 6'5", 302 pounds was his overall size, and this is another insane athlete, folks. Ran a 5.08 40-yard dash. A man, I will say it again, who is 6'5", 302 pounds, ran a 5.8 40-yard dash, a 1.79 10-yard split. 29-inch vertical jump, 9-foot broad jump, 7.33 3-cone drill, 4.55 20-yard shuttle, and 29 reps on the bench press. Not only is this dude incredibly agile, incredibly fast, he's very strong as well. And he was an absolute mauler playing left tackle while at North Dakota State. He was an NFL comparison to Alex Kappa, funnily enough, another player who has been drafted in the past by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And when he was drafted, there was a legitimate question as to whether or not Cody Mauch would play tackle. Would he play guard? That question has seemingly been answered as Buccaneers general manager Jason Licht announced in a press conference after the pick that Mauch would most likely be playing guard for the Buccaneers moving forward. I think that that is a good spot for him. He certainly has the size of a guard at the NFL level. Again, at 6'5", at a little over 300 pounds. And I think that this is a great selection. I think that this is going to be a guy who you could consider a starting guard right away. And the Buccaneers have had a lot of questions. We've talked about this on BleacherReport.com already, but there have been reports that Tristan Wirfs is going to be moving over to left tackle. Luke Gedeke, the Buccaneers' second-round pick last year, is going to be moving over to right tackle. There are a lot of different movements that are going to be happening along this offensive line, but you cannot discredit the amount of investment the Buccaneers have made in their O-line in the past 4 years. Tristan Wirfs, former first-round pick. Cody Mauch, now former second-round pick. Robert Hainsey, former third-round pick. And Luke Gedeke, former second-round pick as well. This team has invested a high number of high-level draft picks in their offensive line, and it seems like this unit is getting younger and getting better as time goes on. I think Cody Mauch is going to be one of those guys who's going to be able to come in, compete right away for a starting guard spot, and just have a mean streak to him, right? I think you see that in his overall play. You take an attitude like that, a guy with a mean streak, you add him to Tristan Wirfs, one of the best tackles in the entire of the NFL. Ryan Jensen, one of the best centers in the NFL, and a guy who has a mean streak of his own, and Luke Gedeke, a young, promising offensive lineman taken in the second round last year, who, guess what, has a mean streak of his own as well, and you've got a recipe for success, in my opinion. That's why I am giving the grade of the Cody Mauch selection by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a B+ grade. I think that it was certainly a need for the Buccaneers to improve along the offensive line, both trenches, really, if you break it down, and they were able to get that done with the Calijah Kancey selection and with the Cody Mauch selection as well. Moving on to the next selection that they made with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the third round with the 19th overall pick, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers went back to the defensive side of the football and selected YaYa Diaby, defensive edge out of Louisville. 6'3", 263 pounds. This is, you guessed it, another athletic specimen. Coming out of the combine, he was the second graded defensive end in terms of athleticism scores, and much like what I've said with other picks already, it's not hard to see why. 4.51 40-yard dash, 1.56 10-yard split, a 37-inch vertical jump, and a 10-foot broad jump. Absolutely crazy numbers here from the edge rusher of Louisville. This is a guy that I think is ready to put up some big numbers as a rotational, possibly even starting caliber edge rusher for the Bucs. Now, I will say, in terms of his overall collegiate production, there wasn't much in 2021 and in 2022. He only had 1.5 sacks in those 2 years combined. However, it's in his final year in college where you really saw YaYa Diaby really explode and really break out as a defender here in college. He finished that year playing in all 13 games, 22 solo tackles, 37 total tackles, 14 tackles for loss, 9 total sacks, 2 passes defended, and 2 fumbles recovered. This is going to be a guy, too, who you don't have to throw into the fire right away. You do not have to rush him into a situation. You have Shaq Barrett there as a starting edge defender. You have Joe Tryon-Shoyinka there as a starting edge defender. You just re-signed Anthony Nelson to a long-term-ish type of deal to be your third edge rusher. YaYa Diaby, third-round draft pick, is your fourth edge defender in a rotation. That's a pretty strong rotation, in my opinion, and I think that he has so much room to grow. He has got your prototypical size that you want to see in a starting caliber edge guy at 6'3", 263 pounds. This is a guy that can eventually be a really big deal for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I gave it a grade of a B. I think that it was a very solid pick by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He is a little bit of a raw prospect, and he does only have that 1 year of production, which did lower the grade slightly, but I still think a B is a very solid, very capable grade for the Buccaneers here in the third round, and for YaYa Diaby here going into his budding NFL career. He's got some momentum on his side based on how his last year went while at Louisville, and he's got some phenomenal combine numbers to support a great athlete who is a little bit raw, but if you can refine him, and I think that that is something that Todd Bowles and his coaching staff can certainly do, I think you've really got a special player on your hands. I want to go ahead and shift gears and move on to the next selection that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers made with the 18th overall pick. In round number 5, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers selected SirVocea Dennis, linebacker out of Pittsburgh. Hey, it's a teammate of Calijah Kancey, and this is another really good player out of Pitt. 6 foot tall, 1.5 inches, 226 pounds. You guessed it, another athlete. He came out of this draft the 11th ranked linebacker in terms of athleticism scores. Didn't do much at the combine besides the bench press, but still put up some really solid numbers while at his pro day. I believe he ran a 4.51 40-yard dash and just put up some really good speed and agility type numbers at his pro day as well. He was absolutely turning heads at the Pittsburgh Pro Day, and 19 bench reps on the bench press is pretty darn good as well. A couple of things that I know a lot of people love about SirVocea Dennis coming out of Pitt is, firstly, his stats. You look at his overall statistics in 3 years at Pitt, and it was pretty darn good. Going back to 2020, he had 14 tackles for loss and 4 sacks, finished with 55 total tackles. Then in his junior year in 2021, he finished with 4 sacks, an interception, 82 total tackles, 10 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks. He also had 1 touchdown and 1 fumble recovered as well. In 2022, in his senior year, he played in 12 total games, finished with 94 total tackles, 12 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 1 interception, 3 passes defended, and 2 forced fumbles. This is a guy that is getting better every year he is playing, and he was a leader at Pitt for multiple years, a team captain, a guy that was a very vocal, very passionate locker room leader. That seems like the type of guy that you want to bring into a rookie class. And we have seen situations like this in the past where you bring in young, strong leaders in your draft classes, and they kind of really bring the draft class together, even going as far as bringing in obviously undrafted guys, and are able to lead kind of smaller groups, smaller units on this Buccaneers roster. We've seen it even with Devin White going back to the 2019 NFL draft. This is a very similar guy in terms of passionate leadership in SirVocea Dennis. I think that he is a guy that will come in right away, be a strong leader to this young core of guys who have joined the Buccaneers, and really be able to get a hold of things and be that type of leader that the Buccaneers think that he will be, the type of leader that he was while at Pitt. And the stats speak for themselves. He's a type of guy that is a perfect fit for a Todd Bowles type of defense. He can blitz as an inside linebacker. He's a very sure tackler, very good in run defense and in pass rushing as well. He is a type of guy that adds that type of versatility, has a little bit of pass coverage game in his repertoire as well, and is overall just a good football player, man. That's what he is. SirVocea Dennis is just a good football player, and I think he'll continue to get better. I think he's got all the tools. He's got all the traits. He's still young enough. He's got the size. He's just got everything that you want to see in a linebacker in this Todd Bowles type of defense here. And overall, I think it's a very solid pick. One of my personal favorite picks of this draft. I love the leadership. I love the ability. I love just everything about this guy. That's why I gave SirVocea Dennis a B+ grade. I think that it was a good selection by the Buccaneers to make. Fits a need, because after this year, you got to remember, the Buccaneers have Lavonte David with an expiring contract. You have Devin White with an expiring contract. There is not a guarantee that those guys are going to be back. I think that if SirVocea Dennis continues to grow and develop, he genuinely could be a starting caliber linebacker for this Buccaneers roster. So there is a lot of excitement from me about this pick. Hopefully there is a lot of excitement from you guys about this pick as well. Moving on to another fifth round selection that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers made with the 36th overall pick in the fifth round. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers selected Purdue tight end Payne Durham, 6'6", 253 pounds. This is a big, big man in the middle of an offense and kind of shifted gears a little bit in terms of athleticism here. Whereas with the previous picks, you saw so many athletes that were taken there. Payne Durham is not the biggest athlete in the world. He ran a 4.87 40-yard dash, 1.61 10-yard split. However, 34.5-inch vertical jump makes sense. The dude is 6 feet 6 inches tall and a 9-foot 9-inch broad jump. Overall, some pretty decent-ish numbers in terms of tight end athleticism. And what strikes me the most here with Payne Durham is his overall production. Let's go back to 2021 and 2022. Those were the 2 years where Payne Durham was playing the most. In 2021, 10 total games played, 45 receptions, 467 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns. Then in 2022, his senior year, 13 games played, 56 receptions, 560 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns. That is a grand total of 14 touchdowns in 2 years, folks. That's pretty good. And what that says to me, even going back, by the way, to 2020 and 2019, in 2020, he had 3 touchdowns. 2019, he had 4 touchdowns. This guy, 21 touchdowns in 4 years playing at Purdue, screams to me a red zone target. And the Buccaneers already have Cade Otton as their number 1 tight end right now. You have Cody Keefe as your main blocking tight end. Now you seemingly have your main red zone tight end in Payne Durham. As we saw in those highlights that we have here on Bleacher Report, you saw him getting targeted in the red zone constantly. You saw a big guy who was used as a safety blanket in the middle of the field. Guess what? That's probably what he's going to be used as here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as well. This is a guy that is able to really go up, catch the ball at the high point of the throw, and just come down with a lot of tough catches due to his height. The guy's just as big, if not bigger than Mike Evans, folks. That's pretty darn significant, I think, and I very much see it as a possibility that Payne Durham is going to be used in the red zone consistently by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, be it whoever is at quarterback, Baker Mayfield, Kyle Trask, whoever it may be. I think that Payne Durham is going to be a guy that is targeted very, very heavily in the red zone, and I think we could see very similar touchdown types of production for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers moving forward. However, for this selection, I did give it a B-. I gave it a B- because of the lack of athleticism in some situations. There are still some things that Payne Durham needs to work on in his game. He is a capable blocker, and I do think he is a solid red zone guy, but he just needs to become a little bit more of a well-rounded tight end, which I certainly think he will have the opportunity to do here with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I also don't know about the idea of having such a young tight end room. Myself personally, I am always a guy who supports the idea of having at least one veteran in each single unit of the team. The Buccaneers could still add a veteran tight end before the season starts, but it's a pretty young tight end room right now, and we'll see how it goes moving forward. Might be a little bit of a risk there, but Payne Durham, a B- grade overall. Incredibly solid red zone target that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are getting, but does need to polish a little bit of his skills to become a well-rounded tight end. With the next selection that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had, they went with a defensive back coming out of Kansas State and Virginia prior with the 181st overall pick in round number 6. The selection was Josh Hayes. Josh Hayes is an interesting guy. 5'11", 185 pounds. His only main year of major playing time was in 2022 for Kansas State. He finished with 48 solo tackles, 71 total tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 7 passes defended, and 1 forced fumble. Right now, as it stands, the Buccaneers have two big needs along their secondary. You need a strong rotational safety, and you need a strong nickel corner as well. You did bring back Jamel Dean. That was great. You did bring in Ryan Neal from the Seattle Seahawks. That was really good. Both signings and re-signing, I guess I should say in the case of Dean, were very, very solid things that got done. However, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers still need more depth at those positions. You got a guy who can do both in Josh Hayes. And I will say this, that is a good thing to see here out of Hayes. He has that versatility. He played cornerback and safety in college, and he will be likely doing both for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here in this role. However, the lack of interceptions was certainly concerning, and I do think there is more of his game that needs to be polished as a tackler. Now, I will say this man is an absolute unit in terms of tackling. 71 total tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss is nothing to sneeze at. And I think this is going to be a guy who will be a solid tackler in the secondary and be a guy who the Bucs will use on blitzes. We all know Todd Bowles likes to do his safety blitzes, and I think we will see a similar thing here with Josh Hayes and how he is used. However, being completely honest, I wasn't too familiar with Hayes in the pre-draft process, and based on some of the players who were there on the board when this selection was made, definitely had me questioning it a little bit. That's why I gave this selection a total grade of a C+. It's not a bad selection, I want to say that, but given the comparison of some of the other players that were on the board and just the lack of overall production we have seen from Josh Hayes, I think that this is definitely one that is going to have to be proven to be a good pick, I think, when everything is said and done. And I think Josh Hayes does have the ability to do that. But it definitely seems like with this selection, the Bucs are comfortable moving forward with Antoine Winfield Jr. and with Ryan Neal as their starting safeties at this moment. Josh Hayes being that third safety is, I think, a fine spot for him. But I don't know if he's 100% ready yet to be that starting nickel corner. That is still a question mark for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and that is certainly notable. The second to the last selection that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers made was also another late round selection that I know a lot of people were pleasantly surprised with. In the 6th round with the 191st overall pick, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers selected Trey Palmer, wide receiver out of Nebraska, 6 foot tall, 192 pounds. We're back to the athletes, folks. Trey Palmer has ridiculous speed, a 4.33. Yes, you heard that right. A 4.33 40-yard dash, a 1.51 10-yard split. Trey Palmer is an absolute beast. And you saw that in his overall stats in his senior year at Nebraska. He also played at LSU for 3 years before joining Nebraska and the Big Ten. But in his senior year, he finished with 71 receptions, 1,043 receiving yards, 9 receiving touchdowns. He also had 5 rushing attempts in 75 yards. He finished with 9 total touchdowns on the year. Another important thing to see here is that Trey Palmer has a lot of experience as a returner. He did only have 4 returns while at Nebraska in terms of punt returns, but in terms of his total collegiate career, going overall, including the LSU time, he had 27 total punt returns, he had 18 total kick returns, and he had 2 returning touchdowns total. That's pretty good. And given the Buccaneers' need at returner, potentially, they do have Devin Tompkins in that role currently. Trey Palmer, I think, is a guy that you cannot just pencil in right now as your number 4 wide receiver. The Buccaneers had a big need for that. They lost so many guys in free agency, but you can also possibly pencil in Trey Palmer as your starting returner right now. He's going to be battling with Devin Tompkins. He's going to be battling with Kalijah Geiger for that starting returning opportunity. But I think even if he isn't the starting returner, if it does go to a guy like Devin Tompkins or a guy like Kalijah Geiger, Trey Palmer is a guy that I think is going to be a dynamic weapon in this offense. I understand why so many people were excited for this selection. I gave it a B+ grade. Reason I did was because I thought it was an absolute steal at this point in the draft. You got a 4.33 40-yard dash receiver in the 6th round, late in the 6th round at that. I think that this was a knockout selection for the Bucs. I think that Trey Palmer is going to make an impact right away. fitting into a Dave Canales style of offense. I think that the versatility and the possibilities are limitless for Palmer, and I think he's going to be used in a lot of different ways and is really going to be able to showcase that speed if he is able to get into open space. Finally, folks, before I go ahead and wrap up this draft recap for the Bucs, we have Jose Ramirez as the final selection for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, pick number 196. Guess what? It's another athlete. A 4.73 40-yard dash, 1.63 10-yard split, 34.5-inch vertical jump, 9-foot 10-inch broad jump, 6.95 three-cone drill, a 4.3 20-yard shuttle, 21 reps on the bench press as well. So he's got a little bit of strength and a good amount of speed to his game. 6'2", 242 pounds. And folks, Jose Ramirez is a pass rush specialist, and he put up some pretty good numbers while at Eastern Michigan in his final 2 years. You look, 13 games in 2021, 30 solo tackles, 62 total tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 4 passes defended. In 2022, 12 games played, 40 solo tackles, 66 total tackles, 19.5 tackles for loss, 12 total sacks, 2 passes defended, 1 fumble recovered, and 2 forced fumbles. This is a guy that I think was another really interesting pick. With the 196th overall pick, guess what, folks? He's going to be your 4th to 5th pass rusher in this unit. You have, again, Jotron Shawinka, Shaq Barrett, Anthony Nelson, YaYa Diaby, and now you have Jose Ramirez as your 5th edge rusher. That's crazy. This is a guy that you see in the stats, you see in the tape. A guy who can stop the run, who can get into the backfield, be it to stop the runner or sack the quarterback, and is very efficient. I remember watching the draft coverages here at Bleacher Report and in other places as well, and everybody was salivating over this pick. They thought it was an absolute steal. It's understandable to see why. This is a guy that I think has really good potential, is a dark horse in terms of being just one of the more efficient picks that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers made. And I say that with complete confidence because I think that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers really did get a good player here. I did give it a B grade because as it stands right now, yes, he does have some things that he needs to work on, and we're going to see how Jose Ramirez's skills translate coming out of Eastern Michigan going to the NFL. But I think that overall they have a guy with phenomenal potential. And then, folks, just to kind of wrap up this stream and wrap up the draft class as a whole for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I gave it a B+ grade. I think the Buccaneers really addressed a lot of needs here, be it in terms of defensive line depth, offensive line starting capabilities, edge rusher depth, wide receiver depth, anything that you want to say. The Buccaneers were able to address it in some way, shape, or form. I know some people may say, well, they didn't get a quarterback. Well, they didn't get a running back. They didn't technically get a slot cornerback, and they didn't technically get a starting caliber safety. And I understand those concerns, but I still think that this is an incredibly solid draft from the Buccaneers and a lot of guys with loads of potential. They got a lot of athletes. They got a lot of great players who I think are going to be very good Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the foreseeable future. Folks, I want to thank you guys so much for watching this live stream here at BleacherReport.com. Stay tuned for more live streams, not just about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but for the entirety of the NFL and all other sports in between. Thank you guys so much for watching, being a part of the chat. Thank you so much for Bleacher Report for having me on as well. And as always, folks, we will see you all in more videos and in more live streams here at BleacherReport.com. But until then, and as always, folks, goodbye for now. See you soon, and go Bucs.